Hello, fifth grade family. Happy Thursday. We're going to go ahead. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to make sure that you have the document that's on my screen open on your computer. Several friends joined me in study hall this week to learn how to do that. But this worksheet that you see on my screen, you have one too. And every day you should be filling it in and turning that worksheet in. And then that's what I'm grading in Jupyter. Today's Do Now says, what has been the best part of your week so far? And what made that part of your week so special? Please write 4 or more complete sentences and then press play when you're ready to continue. All right, if you pressed play, that means you're ready to move on. So let's meet on page 144. We're going to start off with me giving you the correct answers for yesterday's classwork. I'm going to do this kind of quick because I want to make sure that you guys have tons of time to finish all your work for my course, but also for social studies, Spanish, ELA West, mathematics, music, art, science, all of it, my friends. The answers for page 144 are number 1, mutiny, number 2, rain, number 3, swindle, number 4, alibi, number 5, modify, number 6, frank, number 7, discharge, number 8, economical, number 9, negative, number 10, confederate, number 11, singular, number 12, pursue. Your job now is to pause the video, and just like it says right here, you're going to complete page 145, synonyms and antonyms. When you're finished with that, go ahead and press play, and we're going to read 10 more pages of our book. We finish the book tomorrow. I'm not ready. It's so good. All right, press play when you're done. All right, let's read. We're going to start on the top of page 388. Jeannie was just having a moment with Grandpa out on the porch, and he was getting a chance to ask some of his questions finally. Suddenly, they hear a rickety sound coming up the driveway, and they both know that it's Crab coming to spoil the moment. Well, I got a dog. Then, out of nowhere, Grandpa hollered, "Stick him, Samantha! Stick him! Stick him!" Samantha stopped barking, almost with perfect timing, and then made a few circles before lying down in the hot sun. "Ah, I agree, Sammy. It ain't worth it. We'll just wait for Mary to get back." "Come on, Brooke." Crab looked pained. "What are you here for, Crab?" Crab pulled the cigar from his mouth, spit, and then put it right back in where it had been. "I came by to check on the boy," he said, "and to drop off some goodies." Crab tossed the rolled up paper bag to Jeannie and set a brown bagged bottle on the porch. "I thought that was your daughter's job now." "Yeah, well it is, but that's just because I knew she was going to be coming up here anyway. Plus, to be frank, I felt so darn bad, I ain't know what to do. I guess I thought it'd be better for me to lay low and hide out for a while, especially from Mary. Shoot, it was bad enough having Tess mad at me." Grandpa took a sip of his tea and nodded. He kept a straight face, a cold one, since Crab pulled up. He let it slip. His mean mug was relaxing, as he admitted, "I can't blame you for that. Truth is, it ain't been much better for me up here at the hill. But Jeannie's been here to keep my head on." Crab nodded. "And Ernie?" "He's fine. At least he's going to be." Crab nodded again. Well, I'm a head back down the hill. Just stop by to drop that stuff off," Crab said, heading towards his car. "Crab," Grandpa called, getting up from his seat and inching forward, swinging his arm low until it touched the bottle. "Take this with you." Crab looked puzzled. He glanced at Jeannie and then back at Grandpa before grabbing the bottle and toe bouncing back to his junker. Guys, what was in that brown bag that Grandpa said he didn't want anymore? Right, it was a bottle of alcohol, and he said, "Crab, I don't want this anymore." What do we think that might link back to? Yeah, I think it relates to the fight that he had with Grandma as well, and how he sort of made a decision to be a little bit better since that fight. As Crab's car left in a cloud of smoke and dust, Samantha snapped back into action, jumping around and barking. The breeze picked up even more, and the sky rumbled like an upset stomach. Jeannie was buzzing about the whole Crab-Grandpa interaction, trying to figure out what it all meant. It felt like it was some kind of immense, but Jeannie couldn't be too sure. He took a peek into the bag. Whoa, a fly motherlode. Crab was definitely making amends. Now, where was I? Grandpop asked. You were going to tell me about the yellow house, Jeannie said. Right. Grandpop sniffed. Jeannie immediately thought it was another stinky armpit moment, but Grandpop put that to rest by saying, I smell rain, and this is going to be a long story. So how about we go back in the house? Samantha finally stopped barking. Matter of fact, Samantha's a part of the story, but not this Sam, the original Sam. Jeannie wasn't exactly sure what Grandpop meant, but he followed anyway, mason jars and bag of flies in hand, as Grandpop headed for the door. Once inside, Grandpop, to Jeannie's surprise, moved through the kitchen right past the Nunya business door and right into the living room. Then he felt around and eased down onto the couch, a couch that Jeannie had never seen Grandpop sit on. He reached out to grab his drink from Jeannie, and then he patted the cushion next to him. Sit. Jeannie sat. He laid the bag of flies between them, and before he could take a sip of his own tea, Grandpop ripped right into the story. When I was a youngster, living in that old yellow house back there in them woods, there was a man named Barnabas Saint who used to live at the bottom of the hill, not too far from Crab and Tess. Barnabas was probably the only person my daddy called a friend. They used to work together, and back in them days, black men down here worked in the tobacco fields. Times were different, you understand. This was the early Jim Crow days. Jeannie had learned some of this in his social studies class, racism and slavery. Question for later, who is Jim Crow? My daddy and Barnabas Saint worked a field 2 or 3 miles down the road owned by this man with the last name Bristol. Grandpop continued. Now, old man Bristol used to love dogs, and he kept them in his barn. Same barn that he made all the field hands. My daddy, Barnabas, and a whole bunch of other men keep the farm tools. Up in there with the dogs and the dog mess and all of that. He leaned forward, and Jeannie could tell that the story was about to get good, even though he was still waiting for Grandpop to tell him about the yellow house. Bristol was a mean son of a gun. I mean, just a nasty you-know-what, always threatening men and yelling at them like they weren't people, like they were his dogs too. So one day, not long after one of Bristol's mutts gave birth to a litter, the men all went into the barn to put their tools away. It had been a hard day, and Barnabas had had enough and decided that he was going to steal himself a puppy. So he reached down and he snatched one of the little rascals up. He stuffed it in his hat and tucked his hat under his arm. Barnabas and my daddy ran the whole 3 miles home, laughing their heads off. Grandpop leaned back. The rain had finally started, and it was gently tapping against the roof. What happened? Jeannie asked, now all in. Well, it turned out old man Bristol knew exactly how many pups was in that litter. And after questioning all the men the next day, well, threatening them, really, one guy broke and said that he saw Daddy and Barnabas run out of the barn suspiciously. Oh, man. Oh, man is right, Grandpop said. Bristol showed up at the yellow house, all in my daddy's face, asking all kinds of questions. I was just a kid. I came to the door to see what was going on, and Daddy told me to go to my room. I ran to the top of the stairs, but then I stayed there, and I listened. I listened to Bristol tell my father that either he'd tell him the truth or he would have our whole family killed. What? Jeannie gasped, not believing his ears. He could do that? Back then, a lot of people could. So what did your dad do? Grandpa looked at Jeannie square. He did what he had to do. He told Bristol that Barnabas stole the puppy. Grandpa lifted his right leg and rested his ankle on his left knee so he could scratch the snake bite scar. Bristol fired my daddy on the spot. The next day, Barnabas came to the house upset because he had gone to the field and Bristol had fired him too. But my father didn't tell him that he already knew what had happened. My father just couldn't face him. He couldn't admit what he had done. He couldn't apologize for what he knew full and well was coming next to Barnabas. And when he finally had the courage to make it right, it was too late. Bristol and his boys set Barnabas's house on fire. Grandpop nodded. Slowly. They burned to death. The house smoked for 2 days, and on the 3rd day, my father, who had become a ghost himself, went down to Barnabas's. I always felt like he went to go pay his respects to Barnabas' spirit or something. But when he came back up from the burned house, he had that puppy. My mother named her Samantha. Jeannie gasped again. You mean the puppy lived? Yeah, the dog lived, Grandpop replied. And that wasn't the only time my pop went down to Barnabas's house. He would go down all the time and come back with pieces of wood from the floor of the house and a screen wire from the doors and windows. That's what he used to make those bird cages you and your brother found in that old house. Jeannie froze. He was caught. Yeah, that's right. I know all about that. Your grandma told me. Grandpop flashed a split grin. Some of them very same cages are in my room. But you already know that too, don't you, little Wood? Jeannie's breath caught in his throat. Grandpop dropped his lead back down. Anyway, why am I even telling you this story? We were talking about Samantha and the yellow house, Jeannie reminded him. Ah, right. The point is, my old man was never the same. He was already a little scattered from his time in the war, and everybody thinks the war is what drove him over the edge. But after the whole thing with Barnabas, it got really bad. It was what broke him, because he couldn't forgive himself. Not for making the decision that he made, but for not apologizing and being honest with his friend when he had the chance. The old man was locked in guilt for the whole rest of his life. Grandpop circled the rim of his jar with a finger. And that's why I keep Sam, a version of Sam, around, as a reminder. But what about the tree and all of those birds? Jeannie asked, trying to keep the conversation going a little longer, hoping to shake the weird feeling that was creeping into his stomach. Plus, he really wanted to know. I mean, what made that happen? Grandpop crossed his legs. I don't know. What do you think? Jeannie did have a thought, one that came instantly, probably from every scary movie he had ever sneak-watched, combining with the story that Grandpop had just told him. A thought about whether people could die and then come back. If Grandpop's dad could be that tree, still trying to break free from the guilt. Or maybe Barnabas Saint was the tree, tearing the house apart, and Grape Grandpop was the birds, sitting in all of that mess, eating themselves. Either way, Jeannie knew he couldn't actually say this to Grandpop. He wasn't even sure he knew how to say it without sounding silly or mean. But what if it were true? Could that happen to Jeannie? Or to Grandpop? Or to Dad? But it can't be true. It can't be. Don't be stupid. Too many scary movies. But what if... By now, Jeannie had a lump in his throat the size of, well, a small bird. Thoughts were coming every which way. The death of Michael Jackson, the disposing of the body, the constant fear that Grandpop would find out, the fact that he wasn't sure anymore if he should even catch another one, and he realized that he also felt trapped. Trapped in a deep hole that he had dug all by himself. I don't know, was all Jeannie could say. His head was spinning. But he knew. He knew what he needed to do to keep himself from becoming a nasty bird eating other birds, or a tree growing in a scary house. He knew that it was time to come clean. Grandpop, I need to tell you something. What's that, grandson? And then the front door opened. How could you let this happen? Dad's voice came through the house. His dad. His parents were back. And it sounded like he was storming into the kitchen, followed by Grandma, Ernie, and Ma. Dad was totally going off. I knew sending them down here was a bad idea. He was fuming. Ma? Dad? Jeannie called out in confusion, hopping up. What are y'all doing here? Y'all 3 days early. Ma met Jeannie in the kitchen entranceway and hugged him tight. We just needed to get back to our boys. We missed you too much. He missed her too, he really did. He studied her face to see if it was still tired, if she looked sad, because if there was any sadness on her face, Jeannie would know that he would have to get back to figuring out which parent he would like to live with. He would also know to never take Shelley to Jamaica. Ooh, you stink. You "I like outside," Mama zinged him, scrunching her nose up so Ernie couldn't tell if there was a smile with it. But she didn't look tired like she usually did. That was a start. Jeannie kept his eyes on his mother as she went over to the couch, bent down, and kissed Grandpop on the cheek. "It's good to see you, Papa Harris," she whispered. Grandpop smiled sheepishly. How was Jamaica?" Jeannie asked, his brain bouncing back and forth between being happy to see his mother and totally freaking out. Because, yeah, he was excited to see her, but he was about to confess something, maybe the biggest mistake that he ever made, and he didn't want her to be there when he confessed it. Because then he would have to confess it to everyone. And the difference between parents and grandparents is that parents were allowed to get real mad. Ma broke into a smile, but before she could answer, Grandpop called out for Dad. "Son?" Jeannie quickly shifted his gaze as Dad stalked into the living room with Grandma and Ernie, who was holding a huge suitcase following behind. Dad gave Jeannie a big hug, but his face was tight. His eyes narrowed and were lasering in on Grandpop. Grandpop rocked forward, slowly getting to his feet. Ma reaching out to help him, but then pulling back, knowing that that wasn't what Grandpop would have wanted. That's where we have to stop our reading from today. Tomorrow, my friends, we're going to read the last pages of this book, and we're going to find out the end to our story. Go ahead now and make sure you highlight in green that you did the reading, and then write your journal entry response of 4 or more sentences. Can't wait to teach you tomorrow, and I can't wait to see you next week. Remember, we'll have a community circle Monday at 2, and on Tuesday at 11:45, we will have a study hall where I'm hoping we can play Quizlet live together. All right, bye.